much younger. I had a lot more courage. Maybe I just done it. I was terrified this time around. Terrified.
I do want to take steps though, because you need more like steps to do it daily.
I don't know why I'm so hungry.
All right.
Help them.
Test, test. Can y'all? This is my. Is it going out right now? Okay. You never know. All right. I give a few more folks just a little bit more time, just so everyone can get situated and sit down, and then we'll get started with this presentation. Hope everyone's doing all right. Thank you all so much for coming out. This is like my first time ever doing something like this. Anything comparable was my Eagle Scout project way back when. Too young, so I practically forgot about it. But regardless, thank you all so much for coming out. All right, great. Let me get started. So again, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on this Friday evening. I know I was talking to Ramen earlier about the fact that it's a Friday. It's a very nice out today, and you know, this is the time where folks will be like, let me go see if Looney's is open, and we can get down to the bars later on. But that's regardless of the point. Y'all here for learning. Y'all here to gain something new, and I appreciate that. So, with that being said, I bet you're wondering, if you didn't get the invite, what this event is about. So, to start off, this is a very diverse campus with a lot of different news publications and student organizations as well, with the Black Student Union, the Asian American Student Union, Students for Justice in Palestine, Plumas, the Jewish Student Union, UCS Local 54, Anak Bayan, Black Church Matter, and a litany of so many different but a litany of different student activist groups and student affinity groups around this campus that do great work in not only bringing a community together, but making sure that a change is made on their campus for their respective communities for the better. But it's when movements like this happen that the press, student publications like the one that I'm affiliated with, the Black Explosion, as well as La Voz Latina and the Mitzpah, and so many others are there to cover and to give the proper reporting necessary to not only shed a light on these movements, but to hopefully make sure that they reach a wider audience so that more can join their cause, so that more can learn and to contribute to a movement that will change this campus for the better. So with that being said, let's get started with the first three publications that I would like to highlight, and then we'll go on to the Q&A. See if I got this. Okay, let me go ahead. There we go. So the first one that I'd like to highlight is my personal alma mater, the Black Explosion, which was established and founded between 1967 and 1970 by one of our panelists here, Patricia Pat Wheeler. So yeah, that's awesome. This paper was published out of a need and formed out of a need to bring attention to issues that affect the Black community, as well as to give proper reporting and reportage that the main publication at the time, the Diamondback, was not giving. So much of what they covered and so much of what we've covered all relegated around bringing a Black student voice to the wider TERP community. This ranges from the Occupy Stamp community in the aftermath of Mike Brown, as well as the outpouring of voices and concerns and testimonies in regards to how this campus has failed the Black and Brown population. There's the reporting on the latest development on the war in Gaza with what's been going on with the encampments that not only are happening here, but across the country. There was also when the news was found outside of Nibiru way back when. But it's not all, doom and gloom. There's also instances of Black joy with the Spring Fest that happened, Divine Nine practices and events, and the latest development in Black UMD life, making sure that despite the strife, there is always a happier life. Did not mean to rhyme there, but I'll digress. Oh, did I? Okay, there we go. All right, then we have La Voz Latina, which is the leading source of Latino, Latina, and Latine news. Founded in 1987, La Voz is a bilingual student publication that focuses on writing news and issues regarding the Latina community at the University of Maryland. Such important publications and stories that I found include the community that was formed for Hispanics and Asian communities on campus, a Salvadorian activist that was involved in oral histories and projects about immigrants, as well as the recent chiseling done by sculptor Rafael Rodriguez, as well as the current editor-in-chief, Alexa Figueroa's opinion ed about her life at Merrill, as well as trying to reform the publication. And then, unfortunately, while I couldn't, and trust me, I tried my very hardest to get anyone to come through for the publication, I still think this is a paper and a publication that's worth knowing, because the unfortunate fact is that not every student news publication survives or reforms so long into the future. Regardless, their experiences and their reportage still matters and still deserves to be spotlighted today. So the public agent, this was established in 1996. Paper was produced by the Asian American Student Union. That 50% is, of course, in reference to the percentage of Asian students on campus. And then, they reported on campus life and national and international issues, everything from then President Lowe's inauguration, his tenure, as well as his plans for UMD, international issues like Japan's population crisis, profiles on Asian Americans and Pacific American leaders in the DMV, including a current staffer here in Janelle Wong, as well as stereotypes in education. So with that being said, hope everyone gets an idea that these student publications, despite the fact that these were students at the University of Maryland, that's already an undertaking in and of itself. They took an even greater undertaking in reporting and doing the great work necessary to bring a voice to the voiceless. So with us, as you can see here, I brought 4 of some of the best panelists in the land. So let's get started with a meeting of the panelists. First one, I have Rahman A. Covert. I'm sorry. Before I start, am I pronouncing that correctly?
So Rahman.
Rahman. Excuse me. That's my fault. Rahman A. Covert, who is a seasoned educator and activist working to support measurable and lasting social change. As a staunch advocate for service learning and community empowerment, he earned a bachelor's degree in Afro-American Studies from the University of Maryland in 2001. While he was at the university, Clover founded and served as the program director for the Saturday Freedom School program, which is an academic tutoring and mentoring program for middle school students. And he also served as editor-in-chief of the Black Explosion. And then Patricia Wheeler, who is retired as interim chair and assistant professor in the Department of Strategic Communications with the School of Global Journalism and Communication at Morgan State University in 2018. However, she received her master's in marketing from Columbia University and a bachelor's in journalism from the University of Maryland. She is the founding editor and creator of the Black Explosion, and in April 2023, she was named to the University of Maryland's Merrill College of Journalism Alumni Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and then we have our current student panelists, as well as reporters and editors from La Voz Latina. Milvian Gonzalez, a sophomore majoring in journalism and American studies with a minor in United States Latina Studies, will be the second editor-in-chief since the paper's revival in 2022. Her first year started working for La Voz Latina as a freelance writer in her freshman year, and she later became a staff writer, an ESOL partnership program coordinator, and an editor for the yearly special edition. And then Alexa Figueroa is a junior journalism and Spanish major at the University of Maryland. She is from Brentwood, Maryland, and has served the community through various forms of advocacy. She works to elevate the voice of her community through journalism. And again, in 2022, she revived La Voz Latina and served as the first editor-in-chief of the paper since then. She has 1 turtle actually two. She sent me the video or a picture, but I digress. She has two great turtles and loves editing pictures in her free time. So clap it up for them as well. So with that being said, let's get on with my panel discussion with my questions. And then, of course, afterwards, we'll get on to the Q&A portion of this as well. So first, let me ask each of y'all, what drew y'all to form or join your respective publications? Let's start with Patricia Wheeler and then
Okay, it's Pat.
Pat.
Always Pat. Although Patricia is my name, but I never go by it. Well, when I came into Maryland, I'm gonna really date myself here in 1968. Um, and I'll make a long story short. The Diamondback was the only paper on campus, and it was awful. It was beyond awful in terms of covering blacks and other minorities. And the few students who went there didn't feel welcome. Not that they haven't had black staff members, and some of them have gone on to do very well, but I felt that there needed to be a more voice, an ongoing voice for black students on the campus. So I was a journalism major. I did what I know how to do. Is I said, I'm gonna start a paper. I was working with the Black Student Union at the time, so at the time it was of the voice of the Black Student Union, and they eventually it had to come under Maryland media because Maryland had all these problems with publications and lawsuits and everything else. But I think it really helped, and I am so proud of the people who I don't. First of all, Aaron and all the people who came after me because I would never have believed that that paper would have lasted almost 50 years. So I want to give all of y'all a hand. There's just no way. And it's been continuous. I mean, so I'm just really impressed with the students who have worked on that paper, and I give kudos to all of you. So anyway, with that, now keep the rest of for questions.
Sure.
Well, good evening, everybody. So you can call me Rock, but I, as you've heard, also worked on the Black Explosion. This is not the first wonderful opportunity I've had to be on a panel with Pat, so it's always humbling to be able to live out a legacy. And as kind of what you just heard, that's what everyone's doing here. That's what you all are also a part of. So for me, when I was on campus here, and you'll hear me reference probably a couple of times my life partner, my wife is in the audience too. She's over here to my right. We basically came to this paper together, the Black Explosion, whereas it had been again had this wonderful legacy, had a great reputation, and it came to this point where was someone going to pick this up and keep this going? Or was it going to have to, face this hiatus? And for us, we were like, well, there's no way we're going to let that happen. If not me, who kind of thing. So for us, it was, and I guess in our tenure, one of our major things that we wanted to do was to make sure that this campus respected this paper. And I guess the idea is, as Pat was just saying, the Diamondback was the show in town. And we wanted to be clear that when we were here, I said, we are Black students. We are a very integral part of this community. Our voice matters. You are going to listen to us. We're going to we're going to demand that you listen to us. And one of our, I say one of the slight ways that helped us feel very, very proud and kind of puff out our chest was if for those, Aaron, you say you're finishing up your journalism major, which is also wonderful, by the way. So for journalism students here at the college and for our other panelists who are also going through that experience, you had to get clips as part of your coursework. And when we came to the explosion, no journalism class would respect clips from the Black Explosion for coursework. And we're like, no, we're not going to let that stand. So we came in and we made sure that we were going to be on up and up with the editorial standards, with the quality of the writing. And even though I was never formally trained in journalism, we were going to make sure that we made that paper operate in such a way that you will make sure that you respect the work that these students are doing. And sure enough, by the time when we was done, that was accepted among every other newspaper.
That is wonderful.
All right. So just like I said, helping that legacy continue. And now, Aaron, you're part of that too. And then you all are part of revamping legacies. So it's all about how can we do our part for the time that we have so that we still can talk about it 50 years later.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming. Um, so I grew up in PG County my whole entire life. I grew up in a predominantly Latino and Black community. Coming here to campus was a big culture shock for me since it's a PWI. I worked for different publications on campus, but I felt like none of them understood Latino culture, Latino community, our stories, which are so prevalent in this community because UMD is in a bubble in the middle of PG County, in the middle of all of these amazing and rich stories and communities. When I remembered that La Voz Latina existed years and years and years ago, I decided that this was a space that needed to be brought back. And that's what I did. I brought La Voz Latina back. And since then, we've been able to showcase Latino graduates, Latino stories, Latino faces that you might not see on campus because we're such a small population. But I'm so excited that we get to be part of that community.
Yeah, so definitely I was more privileged than Alexa in that the very first semester I got to declare my major in journalism. Alexa had already revived the paper, it was already existing. Um, so when I was taking JUR 200, I had a clip that I needed to take for the end of the class, and I had just taken a Central American Studies class, so I was very passionate and really wanted to do something related to Central Americans, who are such a big Latino community here in PG County. And my first thought was, I'm gonna write it for the Diamondback, and it's gonna be this great piece, and everyone's gonna read it, and it's gonna be amazing. And so I pitched the idea, and they were like, I don't know if this is very news relevant. And so I was a bit frustrated, and I decided to go and look at the syllabus that had papers going around. And it had the cultural, the usual, the Black explosion, her campus, the mitzvah. And then I see something called La Voz Unida, which is now what we call the Diamondback in Espanol. But that caused me to look it up on Instagram, and I came up with La Voz Latina. And I saw that they were allowing freelancers. And what I love the most is that Alexa never once questioned me if this was an okay pitch, if it was relevant, if it was newsworthy, because it is. And, we're both Central American. I think we both understand that our community is something that still needs to be talked about. And so ever since then, I never once questioned whether this was an important paper or if I needed to work for it again.
Awesome. Now, this next question, each of y'all touched up upon in your own ways, but I do want to dig a little deeper into this issue or this topic. And I want to know what were some of the difficulties that y'all had with being a journalist of color at a PWI such as this one. Let's start with you, Milvian, and then we'll work our way to Patricia. All right.
You want to start that? Why don't you start that? You want me to start or they start?
We can start with Milvian and then
Oh, okay, good.
come.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing has been imposter syndrome. I think going to Merrill, there are a lot of students who their parents are journalists or their parents have been to college, and so they've been able to support them and help them when they started out writing. My parents' education was unfortunately very limited. They were growing up during the Civil War in Guatemala, and so there's also that language barrier. I don't think my parents have ever really been able to help me with my homework since I was like in kindergarten. So, being able to see white students get that support from their parents, I think was always like, oh, I wish I had that. And so definitely that often made me think, sort of doubt my integrity as a journalist and my ability.
I know you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but being taken seriously, I think, is something that I've struggled with a lot. Just with levels, like being reestablished and having to kind of like find our own balance on what we are. Are we completely journalism? Are we activism? Like, what are we? And I think that a lot of people don't understand that kind of line. But personally, for me, I would say, like what you said, having sufficient resources, and feeling like I belong here. Same with me. My parents grew up during the Civil War as well. My dad only has sixth grade education and my mom has seventh grade education. And so coming here and being a journalism major where I have to read and write all the time and having people question, like, for example, I'm also bilingual, so questioning, are you writing the correct kind of English? Is your grammar correct? Things like that has been something I struggled with. I think that a lot of children of immigrants and bilingual students can never find like that perfect line in American society. And that's something I always struggle with my identity. Wanting to speak Spanish here on campus but can't because people judge you or people feel like you're not enough. That's something I also struggle with in journalism as well.
Yes, I think for me, one of the greatest challenges when you're, leading a newspaper is just trying to make sense of that responsibility because a lot of, folks in the community are obviously going to look to you as, all right, you have this privilege to speak for us. And of course, there are so many things that we could be talking about. So it's like, how do you choose what, what gets on the front page? How do you choose what stories you're not going to run because you're trying to highlight and elevate other priorities? For us, one of the greatest challenges or issues that we were talking about when we were here was, I guess you were joking about dating yourself earlier. For me, you told us when we graduated, but anyway, we were here during the kind of like the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, and there was, for those who, and again, I'm a student of history, because I'm, again, African American Studies, that was my jam. So the idea was, if you remember the 90s, there was this rash of a couple of things. First of all, our churches were getting burned down all over the place. To this day, they never caught most of those people. Also, on American colleges, you were having a lot of hate crimes kind of prevalent here. I can talk all long time about that because I became part of the story when it came to that matter. But whether it was pipe bombings at FAMU, whether it was hate letters that happened here at Penn State. So the idea was, how do we make sure that we're talking about these issues that are clearly of national and global importance in a way that's going to do right by the students here? How do we need to talk about this? How do we need to make sure that we're representing this well and doing it in such a way that helps advance the conversation? It feels like a great responsibility, and it is. The good thing is, no one's going to do it better than us because we're us. And that's, again, that's battling that imposter syndrome. Why should we have to prove to anybody that we know how to talk about our life? Who else is going to talk about it better than us? So it's just finding that balance was a challenge, but one that I appreciate looking back on.
Um, Back when I was at Maryland, the Diamondback would tend to cover very negative aspects of Black student life, if they covered it all. And I think one story made a lot of Black students so mad they stormed the Diamondback office. So of course that was another negative story. But instead of doing that, I said, we need to do our own thing. We need to have our own newspaper. There's enough people and I recruited people. I didn't care what their major was. I was recruiting people right and left to come work for the paper. At the time, the Journalism College had no Black faculty members. By the time I graduated, they did have one. Compared to now, because I've been over there and they have several, but they didn't have any back then. Um, but I have to say, Dr. Ray Hubert, he recently just passed away. He was the dean. Um, in a way, he was very supportive. He left us alone. So, um, but anyway, we really wanted to share. Nobody was covering what was happening in Numbera. Um, we were doing these events every month called Awakenings, where we had a gospel choir and a big event. It was a real down home where people could really share emotional things. So I was able to. Plus, we did some other things outside campus. We went and interviewed Perrin Mitchell, who was our congressman at the time, as well as some other intellectuals. I'll give you a good example. Whether you like him or not, Farrakhan came to the campus. And this is a he has a national leadership, at least at that time, and Diamondback didn't write a word about it. Not one word. I don't even think it wasn't so much they just didn't do it. They didn't write, they didn't come. We had Alex Haley come speak to campus. No article in the Diamondback. So we covered all of those events and more. So for people who still have issues, and I have some with, you have some kind of record that there was a Black life going on campus. You would have never known it if you go back and look at the Diamondback, except for some demonstrations that turned ugly or bad, or some other negative aspects of life of campus life for Black students. So we really wanted to document that there was a really positive side to Black life on campus.
Gotcha. So then, you actually segued nicely into our next question, which you said was in ways from the student activist groups that you've covered, as well as the student affinity groups. Let's start with you again, Pat, and then we'll go down. How did y'all cover the movements and protests that helped shape the University of Maryland? How did you get them to trust you? Because, again, as you've mentioned with the Diamondback and with the issue that legacy media has in general, that they haven't always covered these groups in the way that deserve justice or that they gave them a proper voice. So how did you go about covering these movements, these groups, and these students?
Well, I was very fortunate because long before I became the editor, I had been active in the Black Student Union. So the different presidents knew me. And I would suspect that if they hadn't known me, I might have gotten more flack, but they were very, very supportive of me. So I was able to get their support for almost anything I wanted to do. And that included helping us find money and resources and a lot of other things. And they really looked forward to getting the paper out. I mean, there was no digital footprint back then. So it was really a good way of getting news around. And unfortunately, the paper only came out monthly. Um, right. I guess when I left the following year, it came out every other week. I'm not sure anyway, at least you had some kind of documentation. But I didn't have any trouble, and we did write about any of the activism because we and I can't remember because it's been a long time, but we covered all the demonstrations that Black students did. We covered the protest, and we were able to get inside on the protest. So we covered all those things, as well as we covered the fact there was a big rally demanding more Black faculty. I was also able to go to whatever, we had a few Black faculty in other places and talk to them. There was a Black faculty and staff organization, and I enlisted their support. So I think we were just very lucky. And I think because when I came to Maryland, I think the Black population was less than 5%. And one of the things we picketed and protested around were getting more Black students and recruiting and that type of thing. But it was such a small community that there was a lot of support among each other. There was a lot of support. Not that everybody was on the bandwagon, but there was a lot of strong support. So we were able to really build up a strong community base of support.
And just processing, listening to Pat, kind of talking about what the experience was. And again, me being a student of history, I'm always thinking about cycles, how things repeat themselves. I was listening to you saying that the population at the time was about 5%.
Less.
Less than. Well, I venture to say probably not that much better now. It's gotten worse over time. Oh yes, oh yes, and I guess that's kind of brings home this point. Is for me to your question, Aaron. It's we looked at the Black explosion as a point of leverage, meaning that when students were speaking up and were looking for a platform to change something, we made sure that we could come on in and say, we got you. When you show up and have your meeting at Nimburu, or when you do a walk down Campus Drive, we're gonna make sure that it's out there and people know about it. And again, this is before social media was kicking. So the idea is there was a few, you know, very strategic ways to get the word out. And in that sense, it was, the same kind of blueprint from the civil rights movement. The idea was, yeah, you have your protest, you have your sit-in, you have your boycott, but you make sure that you do it in such a way that the drama is going to translate when those news cameras show up. When someone writes that story, it's gonna evoke emotion in folks, and that's what's gonna help drive the mobilization, the activism, which is ultimately gonna bring about your change. So for us, we took that very seriously, and the idea was, and like as I mentioned a moment ago, I became part of that story. I received death threats when I was here because of what we were doing. And again, that was a trend across the country at that time. Unfortunately, you had, students of color in the universities becoming targets because they were trying to push and change some of that systemic racism. And the idea is, yeah, we're going to keep making that pressure. So I'm inspired to hear that you felt like there was people in the university kind of infrastructure or the institution that was supporting you. We did not feel that way. And I guess I'll couch that slightly. We were lucky to have them brew by the time that we was doing what we were doing and they were established. So we had, and I know you were just talking about having resources available to you. So in that sense, we had a lot of some of those core needs, but it always felt like we were fighting to hold on to what we did have. And while I was here, I sat across the table from the general counsel of the whole university, talking about what is our editorial independence really going to be, and what are we going to be able to talk about? Because what you're not going to do is tell us again how to speak about our experience, and that's part of that's the power of having these independent voices because it becomes a threat. And you have to know when we're good at knowing how to wield that power and that influence, it really helps take the activism and helps it helps it be that much more powerful and effective.
I'll say one thing that really connects us and I think sets us apart is how we're a bilingual newspaper. Spanish in this community is so essential. And the way that we write in Spanish and cover the Spanish speaking community has allowed for us to cover such a broad range of things. Like we cover language insecurity within the Latino community. We're able to connect with food vendors in Langley Park and learn about their experiences, talk about child labor or what is seen as child labor in Langley Park, things like that. I think we bring such a fresh perspective because we speak Spanish, because we're able to connect with the community. I think that other newspapers or other people who do not speak Spanish might not be able to have the same perspective because they can't connect with the community in that light and in that way. And that's something that we value so much. One thing that we especially value at La Voz is speaking your Spanish. There are so many different kinds of Spanishes in Central America and Latino America. Um, and we don't value Spain Spanish because that's not what represents the PG County community. And emphasizing that at La Voz has just been able to transform us and really help us connect with each other here on campus as well as in the greater community.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest protests, for us in our time in college has definitely been with the Palestine and Israel conflict. I also got to talk to the Puerto Rican Dominican Association that talked about, they're wanting to Puerto Rico be independent and things like that. So I think the way that I try to connect with them is just understanding them, seeing them as people. I think so many times the media tries to bring black and brown activists as just angry and they don't really get why are they angry, and it's completely reasonable for them to be angry. And knowing that history and understanding why are we frustrated, why are we framed this way, because we don't have resources, of course we're going to be mad, we're human. And so just trying to frame it in the most respectful way is just how I like going about it.
Thank you. Now, let's start with you, Rockman, on this next question. That everyone again kind of touched upon individually, but I'm curious to figure out what do you think, if you do think there is one, what do you think is the connection between journalism and activism, not only just on this campus, but across the world and across this country.
Yeah, so again, it's just to me, I see our job as we help elevate,
Mhm.
we help center, and Pat has talked about this, already while we've been here, is that the structure of the university and the way that information is shared has traditionally gone through the Diamondback, and that's problematic in and of itself for a lot of reasons. But the notion is journalism can help set the agenda. So the idea is, and that's why it's important to have our own or organic and intrinsic, channels of information in our communities because we set our own agenda. As you were just saying, no, we don't have to worry about how someone's framing us because we're going to frame it ourselves. We are going to tell the narrative, and we are going to help set the tone for how the conversation is going to go. And when it comes to any social movement, and we're living through one right now because DEI has now become a bad word. Um, Again, for all my white brothers and sisters in the room and my non-binary folks, woke is maybe new to you. But again, trust me, when we was using it, it had a wholly different connotation. But now woke has its own interesting framing in the national discourse. So the idea is that we've already lived through just in the last 4 years what it looks like when folks take our stuff and try to tell it in a way that's not authentic. So it's always important for us to have something to counter that. And even better, like I said, when we get out there first. So the idea is that our independent media allows us a very, crucial tool to do that. And again, when we get to the point where you've got decades in the bank of again reputation and credibility, it's hard to put a price on that. So I think I'm still inspired just hearing how y'all are relaunching this, the paper, the votes. So the idea is like that is like a deposit. It's an investment that we're putting into the generation that are come after us. Because, like I said, they won't have to fight the same way. That institution will be there, and then for when the activism needs that platform, we're already ready to go. So I think, like I said, those things are. It's a very kind of symbiotic type of relationship, ideally.
Yeah, I completely agree when you say that we set our own agenda because that is completely true. Only we know what's missing from media coverage, and that those are the things that we supplement when we in the community put ourselves in the position to report on those things that are missing. Um, I feel as though we're the only ones that can really tell our stories the best way possible because we know what's been bothering us, why it's been bothering us, what we need from the community, what we need from the government. And that's why it's best for us to, continue reporting on our stories and telling what we've always been doing.
Absolutely. I think activism journalism has always had its ties together, regardless of ethics and like whether you can be at a protest or not. I think just seeing the archives between the Diamondback and seeing just how much they weren't covering and, how upsetting it was that like so much of like what our parents were going through in the 80s and 90s, no one was talking about that. It's just like, oh, this new group of Latinos are coming. Oh, no, they're dangerous. And no more context than that. And so that's upsetting. And so now that we have new immigration groups, I think we try our best to cover it and explain why are they coming? What did the US do? It's usually always an involvement. So yeah.
I was when we first started, we were under the Black Student Union, but they formed a independent corporation called Merrill Media and put the Black Explosion under that because something to do with legal and everything. And basically, they were trying to kill us off, but really, really pushed back against that because, and I had to point out to these people, because it was all white men and people on the Maryland Media Board, that I had to actually educate them the history of the Black press, that the Black press has always been always been activism. And in terms of covering the civil rights movements, or even breaking the baseball barrier, with all the black sports writers who pushed, you need a black player, and that's how we got Jackie Robinson. So there was always been a long legacy from the black press about because objectivity is always, to me, is in the eyes of the beholder, because somebody is making that editorial decision about whether they're going to cover it or not. And just the fact that they fail to cover it, they've already made they've made a decision. So while I think um, you can be objective to a point, you have to take in a lot of other aspects of what's going on in your environment, in the culture, in your history. So I think it was really important, and we survived the Maryland media trying to kick us out. But and back then there was a Jewish newspaper. I don't know if it's the same one. And I supported them. I said, you know what? We've always had ethnic press in this company, in this country, and we can, and there's room enough at the University of Maryland for any group that wants to have a newspaper. So I had no problem with that. Maryland media was like, oh, we can't have all these different newspapers. Why not? So uh,
That's awesome. That's what's up. I know that's not the most descriptive way of like showing my excitement, but
You good. You got
but, but I mean that's no, because that's on the real when folks when we try to bring in more folks um into the reporter space, into writing or into any kind of space that elevates a voice, and there's always a counter voice saying no. Well, it's like, well, why not? What are you afraid of other than different perspective that more folks will get attached to, more folks could see as legitimate as the truth. So yeah, that's what's up. Now, um, my next question, and this is definitely a bit of a lighter one. I'm kind of curious to know, and we'll start with you, Alexa, and then we'll kind of popcorn. We'll go with you, Alexa, then you, Pat, then Rockman, and then Milvian. What was a memorable story or event that you covered? It could be fun, it could be crazy, it could be something that just like, wow, that was insane. But what was a memorable story or event that you covered?
I went to PG County schools my whole life, and I love talking about them just because like the system is so, Lily and Nosy both came from PG County, so crazy. I think a memorable story that I always remember, and I really enjoyed investigating, was I found out that a lot of ESOL students, well, former ESOL students, were being placed in ESOL and they spoke English. They didn't speak Spanish at all. And if you don't know, ESOL is a program where it's English learners of other languages. So you would speak, for example, Spanish, and you go in the program and then you learn how to speak English. So a lot of the money and resources were going to students who didn't need it at all, didn't even speak Spanish. And so I got to interview a lot of students who were in the program and were really confused, and their parents were really confused as to why they were in ESOL. And I always remember that because I never heard back from the county. Like they never they never told me what was going on or why they did that. And it's just something I always think about how, you know, coming from a low income background, knowing that a lot of these resources could go to students who do need it or could have gone to something else, the county automatically places students in the program because of their last name, because their last name sounds Hispanic, or because their parents speak Spanish and maybe they could possibly speak it at home. That's something that I always think about and always bothered me, so I'm glad that we got to cover that.
You lost me in the order.
Oh yeah, I know. I know.
What's supposed to go next?
No, it's Pat, you're next.
oh, I'm next.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of serious stuff, obviously. One of the stories that we really blew up and highlighted and pushed because people were drawing swastikas on. Right, I was so impressed a few years ago when I came out and saw what Nuremberg was, because it used to be like a temporary building in parking lot one. But they were drawing swastikas on the building, and we really blew that story out. But we had so many serious stories. There was another time they were attacking black black female students on the campus by throwing tomatoes at them. So, so I don't want the thing that I enjoyed the most, which actually once they realized they were gonna have to deal with us and we needed press credentials for everything else, I got to go and be right up close and almost backstage when the Jackson 5 came to Maryland. Stevie Wonder came to Maryland. Hey, this is a pretty good deal. So anyway, we got to be, so the fun aspect you were asking as well. So I really got to use my press credentials to come and see a lot of, I didn't get to interview too many of them, but got to interview political figures and stuff, but to entertain, but at least I mean, I was close. I could touch Michael Jackson almost. In fact, I was right below him when some young lady jumped on the stage and security just came and threw her off the stage. It was in Coldfield House. They threw her. However, she got on that stage. Security didn't care. They threw her off the stage. I said, "Oh, she's flying over my head." So anyway, that was one of the fun aspects of covering things at Maryland.
Is that good enough?
Yes.
I don't have a story as fun as that, but in a similar vein, one of the favorite stories both me and my wife Halima talk about is, you know, having the privilege of again being a part of this institution. That again, a privilege that's been afforded to white folks for, basically the whole time. Through us doing this work, and now we have access to some of these same privileges. One of the privileges for us was to meet one of our heroes. I'm studying, civil rights movement, Black Panthers, and Bobby Seale came to campus. So here I am sitting here talking, and I mean, it was intimate too. We just had it was a crowd smaller than this. And,
Issue of the paper, it's right there on the table.
yeah, so for those who are interested, no. And I mean, I still like you can probably see it just in my demeanor. It's still all inspiring to think about that experience. Being that we had a chance to sit down and just have a very human connection with this person who's larger than life, who has literally impacted the world, and yet we get here and just to have this nice, human moment with him. And I feel like that is something, again, I just would not have even imagined I would have been able to do. And it was because of, again, the work that was done to build this legacy, that when he came here, he said, I'm going to set aside time to talk to the Black newspaper. So that is, again, the value of building that legacy in that community, because of we standing on the shoulders of past work, I got to meet Bobby Seale and talk to this guy. I'm saying, so I hope we're going to pay it forward in the same way for folk like you, Aaron, who are going to be able to have those next, life-changing experiences. So yeah, that was still a very cool memory for me, no doubt.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things that I got to cover is when the local shopping center was closing. And so I went to one of the student unions meetings, and I came with the intention of writing about the closing of a local Salvadoran restaurant. And as the leader was talking, she expressed one of their other conflicts was that RAs weren't getting paid, and that if they had a second job, they could only work a minimum of 10 hours. And I was like, wait, hang on, drop everything. Forget the Salvadoran restaurant. Someone else is going to write about that. What do you mean? And so I talked to all of them, and I got to meet all of these, low-income Black and brown students that, a lot of them actually didn't want their name put out because they were like, I do work a second job, and I don't really want that out there. And so I didn't get a lot of sources because a lot of them want to talk about that. And so getting to write about this and being like, this university isn't built for people like us. We are struggling. The fact that people want these positions just because they get free housing is insane, and that they have to work all these hours. They're also students. So that was my favorite story, I think.
Wow.
Good story.
Yeah. I'll make sure to read it when I will. Now, this is a bit more of a speculative question, and it's one that I've always been thinking about since this year and over the past couple of years. And In the wake of, newsroom shrinkages and mergers and closings, etc., as well as a growing distrust in journalists, first, what do you think the cost of that is? And second, how do you think newsrooms can adapt to that so that at least the practice of journalism can still be ongoing? So let's start with Milvian, and then we're gonna go to Pat, and then we'll go down from there.
You wanna
I
remember
know I'm
the
crazy
point?
with these.
Wait, I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared to go first. Can you repeat it one more time?
No problem. In the wake of newsroom shrinkages, mergers, and closings, as well as layoffs, growing distrust in journalists, what do you think the cost of that is, and how do you think newsrooms can adapt?
I think the cost of that is that yeah, there's a distrust in journalists, and nowadays with social media, you can kind of find journalism anywhere really. There are a lot of people, honestly, I followed some of these pages that are like the first ones to put out crimes even before your local newspaper will. And so I think that often has this distrust. And also just like the way that you frame communities. If you frame a community a certain way and that you're not a fan of, you're not gonna want to read that newspaper anymore. You're like, oh well, you're not my favorite anymore. Like I'll go read someone else or I'll go to someone who covers it on Instagram or something. And so I think, just working with the people in the most respectful environment is how you maintain a trust with people and journalism.
Yeah.
I think I'm next. Yeah, what's happening with newspapers is sort of sad, but not surprising. The model that has been built for years was advertising, and the advertising model just doesn't support publications anymore, newspapers, and eventually radio and television, because that's why we have so much streaming. Um, but unfortunately, what has happened when the newspapers downsides, often the black reporters are the first ones, black or Latino, are the first ones to go. A lot of associates have lost their jobs or been downsized or have took the buyout. And what I've noticed in the paper, two papers I still read, Washington Post, New York Times, is that it affects the coverage is awful. And not only is it awful, it's sloppy. And they got rid of the copy. It makes no sense to me you get rid of your copy editors. I don't understand that. So I think in the rush to save money, a lot of mistakes are being made. I think there are new models coming out. You have papers that are not for profit. They're trying to, I don't know if that's going to work, but I hope it does. So it is going to be very, very difficult. But I do agree with the young lady that social media is going to play more and more of an important role. But what I'd like to see, because it scares me sometimes, what's on social media and where they get the information from. I don't, several years ago when we had a big riot in Baltimore, Freddie Gray got killed by the police. And one of my students was saying, 10 people got killed. And I said, where did you read that? She says, read. I said, no, 10 people didn't get killed. And I had this because you have to look at the source of where you're getting your news and information from. And I mean, these are journalism students and they're still quoting crazy stuff. So, hopefully, I think we need more of a media literacy and it needs to start early. I used to say high school, I think middle school, elementary school. And it's not about one particular media, but just how to fact check, how to understand what you see, and particularly with AI coming out, that's really scary. So hopefully, I think there's some hope on the horizon in somewhere, and then there's at the same time there's a lot of reason to be skeptical.
Oh, Bachman, you're next.
I'm next, and we're getting it wrong again.
Yes.
No, I guess the only thing I'll add is to me, the most important thing about this question of the death of journalism as we traditionally have known it is that it is not something that has happened by accident. It is by design, as far as I'm concerned. And the idea is that while, American media by no means is an institution above reproach. The American media, traditional media, has been a source of a lot of problems, still are. And they have still served as a kind of a counterbalance for a lot of what happens in society. It offers some measure of accountability. And I think when you have politicians who, from the pulpit of the White House, talk about journalists as if they need to be executed, if they need to somehow be thrown in jail because they wrote stories about them that they didn't like. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that folks are trying to undermine credibility of journalists because it erodes accountability. And that's one of the few things that we have available to us to exert some power on some of these structures in society. Um, it's no, again, surprise that folks are so upset about so-called cancel culture and Me Too movements and things of that sort, where, again, organic ways of sharing information, spotlighting problems, brought down some very powerful people. And the idea is if we can undermine their credibility and the stories that folks are telling, I get to go on and do what I've been doing and not have to worry about having to be brought to task for that behavior. So I feel like the cost, which was the other part of your question, is that we have a situation where we have less, we have fewer tools at our disposal to help hold people accountable when they do wrong. And we have fewer tools available to us to help limit the privilege that is, again, extended to people in ways that are unfair and inequitable. And like I said, we're seeing that happen. And that's why it's important to maintain these independent, sources of media in our storytelling, because if we don't have that available to us, we are simply going to be acted upon instead of being able to act in our own interest.
I think it has a lot to do with competition, and I think it's been like that forever, where every news site, every news source wants to get the story done first. And no offense to social media or DMB News Daily on Twitter, but why are they at every single crime scene in the DMV at the same time? I think there's a lack of fact checking, and that leads to distrust from the audience. Like you mentioned, like I think just social media plays a huge role in this mistrust. There's a lot of citizen journalists, which is amazing because obviously they get to cover things that not all the reporters can, but that leads to a problem where people aren't checking their news, people aren't, like you mentioned, having the media literacy that they should have, and I think that that leads to a big mistrust with the audience.
All right. And then this final question that I have for y'all, and then we can open this up to the audience if they have any questions. We'll start with you, Pat.
Okay.
Any advice towards up-and-coming journalists?
Boy, I could give advice all day long, but if you're in college in journalism, you need to write. I don't care what you write for. You can write for the Diamondback, the Black Explosion, whatever you got. You need to because I remember when I went to my first internship was with the Washington Daily News, which I know none of you have ever heard of, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I showed him all my stories, and I had written all these editorials and stuff, and I had lots of copy. But he said, "Well, can you write straight news too?" I said, "Oh, I can write anything." But the point is, I had a body of work to show him. I know, so I think it's really important to really develop your craft, not just in the classroom, that's important, but also, and then also start building bridges with people out, well, in college, but well as outside of college. If you can, I think they have an NABJ chapter here, but if not, go to NABJ, see if you can get a scholarship to NABJ. They hire a lot of students to work and cover the conference at NABJ, or other types of journalism. So network, write, and do your research. So, because it is very competitive, I don't care what you want to do, it's really competitive out here, as we've talked about. But I think you really need to work on your craft no matter what you want to do, even if you think, I'm not even sure I want to do journalism after I get out here. But, and I know a lot of people majoring in journalism, they ended up going into law, education, and all of them have said the journalism career really benefited them in what they in the next steps of what they wanted to do.
No one else have any?
This is
I think maybe you.
I'm saying this is just the story today. To me, this question was always tricky. What seminal words can we offer you all? For me, I think of it more like this, and I'm thinking back to when I was in your shoes, sitting, going to a college, event or whatever. I feel like you may not remember most of what we say here, but I hope what you'll remember is what you feel. And even if you don't remember any of the words I say, I hope you can one day down the line remember, I was at this thing, this dude with his long dreads, he was talking and he made it just felt like, wow, we were part of something bigger than ourselves. And I felt strong. I felt proud. I felt capable. And I hope that you all can walk out of here feeling that. Um, because as Pat was kind of outlining, there's just so much that just goes into the experience of being a writer, being a storyteller, that translates to so many other things in your life. Um, for me, I'm an educator now, assistant principal at my old high school, believe it or not, which is crazy. But the Black Explosion again, so speaking of legacy, got me my first gig. Got my wife her first job. So again, like there's value in what you're doing right now. Either it be from the tangible, getting your first job, whether it be you just feeling again like one day breaking out of that imposter syndrome and feeling like, the story that I got to tell and the way that I'm going to tell it is going to be better than anybody could ever imagine. And I hope that you can feel that, when you come out of this experience, be it journalism, writing, in any number of enterprises that you might be studying, you're the best person that's going to be able to do what you do. And I hope folks can leave with that feeling for sure.
Just from my personal experience, I would say don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve to be a journalist or that you don't deserve to tell stories or that the stories that you feel are important shouldn't be told. Because at the end of the day, you know what's missing, you know what deserves to be told, and only we can do that. That's something that I've learned throughout my time here at UMD, and it's something that I tell everyone, especially students in PG County who want to be journalists. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't, because you definitely can.
Yeah, I think for me, it would be just getting to prioritize your mental health and learning that early on. As journalists, I think you get to cover so many like great things, but you also cover some really unfortunate events. And I think, there's so many students who like go through that their first semester where they write a story and, you're only human, you're very empathetic and it gets to you a bit. And so learning how to cope with that early on is going to be your best hope because you're going to do a lot of that. But, you know, just learning that that's just, hmm, um, that's just part of your job, but it's important and, you know, you're doing good in the world with that.
All right. Thank you so much for following a lot of my questions. Y'all gave some great advice. And don't forget, this is live stream where we'll have a recording of this on our YouTube. So don't worry about, having to remember this talk, although that's important as well. You can not only remember the feeling, but hear the feeling as well. So, we got to set up like that. Now,
Ask questions from the audience.
oh, yes.
Oh,
We have,
he has a
let's
slide.
see, limited time. We'll take 3 questions from the audience, if there is any. So, don't be, yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question for you guys. So when Rock and I were students here, I remember there being a really, even though we had all these papers, we had Levels, we had Black Explosion, we had the Eclipse and the Diamondback, and there was this campus-wide sense that the Diamondback was the superior paper, and the Diamondback very clearly had a lot of ethnocentric views and a lot of failure to capture and highlight the stories that we were, writing about in our respective papers. But additionally, in terms of these different papers serving to highlight our voices, then there was still the question of readership. When I was a student here, I worked on the Black Explosion and read the Black Explosion, but I also read La Voz and I also read The Eclipse. But there was still an air from other students of, but why are you reading that one? Why are you picking this one up? Like as if these other stories, these other papers aren't worth the time and the value as if you were to pick up the Diamondback. So all these decades later, what is the climate like? I mean, is that still the prevailing attitude? And if so, what can the university do to kind of address that equity issue? And is there a way that the papers can, I don't know, have some cross-pollination of sorts to strengthen amplifying those voices to reach even more readers? I know it's a chunky question.
I think that's for y'all.
Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Oh, me? Okay, I didn't know I was gonna be part of this, but um, let's see. That's been a question that I've struggled with during my time at the Black Explosion, both as a reporter and as the co-editor-in-chief of it. I still remember times when, after I've done interviewing, and they're like, "Black Explosion, what's that?" You know, we're the first and only Black student-run publication on this campus. Been around since 1968 or 1970. They always say, "You've been around for that long? That's crazy." And it got to a point where it get increasingly more um, soul crushing because, again, we do great work, but for folks to not see or to not weigh it as equally as the Diamondback, it's crushing. However, myself and other reporters on the staff, as well as with La Voz Latina, continue to persevere in spite of that ignorance, whether it's on them or supported by the university campus. So on our end, I've always made it a priority with my staff to read other news publications, especially with La Voz Latina. Whenever I see a La Voz Latina story on my Instagram or on my Twitter, I make sure to post and retweet it and like it so that more eyes are on it. Um, in addition, when I leave, I plan to make sure that this kind of cross-pollination between the Black Explosion and La Voz Latina stays strong um, for years, hopefully on end. Um, in terms of faculty, I always felt that Merrill, as well as the professors, can always, emphasize that there's more than just the Diamondback, or even with the sports desk with the, I guess the light's telling us to go. But guys, I would just,
Go on.
oh yeah,
They didn't pay the bill.
that's great. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. But yeah, I just this is just to say that the professors
They're telling us to
they
go
can do a better job. But any other questions? If we still have time for that.
before they turn out all the lights.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm currently a reporter for the Black Explosion as a video reporter and staff writer. My question for you is, have you guys ever seen the changes in journalism when you were in college to now? We definitely have a growth in our multimedia and it being here now digital. But for you guys, what resources were available when you were in college? And then as well as were you denied any resources or opportunities when you were there, and how has that changed?
Boy, we were denied a lot. I'll give you an example. There was a radio station, there still is, but it was WMUC, and they had no blacks working on the station. And one young gentleman who was very enterprising went down and demanded that we have our own. So we had our own program, and I contributed news to that. Um, I think now I hope things are a lot more open. You don't have to. You're sort of fortunate. I don't think you have to make as many demands as we had to make everything we got, we had to demand. In terms of black students getting their fair share of whatever. We said, well, we pay money, we pay tuition, we pay fees. So I think things have changed. It's become a lot better, but I still think it's really up. I always remember one of my heroes and was an editor himself. Frederick Douglass said, if you want progress, you want change, agitate, agitate, agitate. So you can't stop agitating. And but at the same time, make coalitions with people and groups that support each other, where you see you have a common interest. So um, yeah, that's
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Like, for me, similar themes. The way I guess I would frame it is as the Black explosion, we just lacked the institutional, structure. Like we keep saying like Diamondback as this, just this omnipresent, kind of factor and force. But if you think about the reason we can talk about it that way is because it's just part of the university. Like it is caked into the way that journalism classes are taught. It's caked into the way that assignments in class are given. Um, you compare that just kind of institutional, again, permanency with Black Explosion. We were self-taught.
yeah.
I didn't know any layout design before I came to the Black Explosion. I didn't know what Quark Express was. I don't know what you was using back then. I don't know what you're using now. But that was the program of the day. We had what, two little computers in a room.
We had two computers and only like one license per software. So this computer you could run Photoshop to do your editing, and this computer you could run Quark Express, which is like InDesign, but you couldn't. Then you had to take it on the disk and then go to this next one. I mean, it didn't have to be that way. You couldn't have license for two computers, but this is very low budget.
Yeah, like for instance, for again, my younger folk in here, when you go to like save something on a computer, it's that little icon, look like a square. We actually used that. We used the disk to save stuff and had to like turn that into the printer. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, the idea is that we just had to, from the bottom up. And, when you are part of the institution, you don't have to do that. The structure's there, the precedent's there, you just plug in. So we had to make a way out of, very little way. But again, because the legacy is so strong, and because Black folks are magic, what I'm saying? It wasn't nothing but a thing, and we got it done. But we shouldn't have to. So I'm glad you don't have to go through some of those struggles. But it certainly made us, that much more hungry, much more motivated to get things done. So no doubt.
All right, our final question.
So I'm with Merrill, and I was wondering, because one of our biggest problems has been the fact that we've had to restart so many times. I don't know, I would get really inspired, like listening to this during Black Explosion and all that. I was wondering if you guys maybe had any advice on like how to maintain a legacy and like how to make our legacy stronger this time around.
Um, like I said, I recruited a lot of people. The woman who became the editor after me, her name is Sandra Dawson Long Weaver. She's also in the Hall of Fame. And when she left, she recruited a guy named Greg Countess, who ended up being a lawyer, by the way. So it's really important to try to recruit and train and prop people up. I'm sure y'all are doing that anyway, but it's really important to keep recruiting and training, and it doesn't make any difference if they're not journalists. Um, um, they can still support them as long as they support the mission of what you're trying to do. It's hard. In fact, we didn't talk about this, but it really is a sore spot with me when I heard about this. The difference between between the Black explosion and the eclipse, which happened, I guess, several years later. But despite that, the Black explosion was able to keep going. So you're going to have some, I think any organization is going to have a lot of blips and hard times. And so, um, you know, hopefully some resilience, even if it's just one person who can keep on being resilient. It's easy to quit when you say, I'm not going to do this by myself. Um, but I started off as one person. I didn't have any staff. I was recruiting people. I don't remember Otis Williams was at the head. I don't know. He did poetry for me. I said, that sounds good. If you can write poetry, write poetry. I don't care. So yeah, so I mean, recruit, find people who have an interest. I got guys who are really sports nuts. I shouldn't say sports nuts, sports fanatics. And we had the Black students had intramural teams. I said, go cover those intramural teams and take pictures. And they really got into that. I mean, so I was able to really pull people from everywhere. I guess they were just, oh, here comes Pat Will. We need to run and hide. So,
And all I'll quickly add is in the same vein of what Pat was just saying, we were very intentional about, again, creating almost like interns. And again, if you think about how, again, these institutions that have the capacity, the infrastructure and everything, that's how they do business. They have someone who's very clearly identified as, all right, well, you're like the understudy. You're gonna shadow what this person is doing. You're gonna sit in on the meetings. You're gonna learn the software. You're gonna get incremental, responsibility. So again, we shouldn't have to figure that out ourselves. But like to your point, if we want to be able to continue, we're gonna have to, dig in and create it, where we, where we should not have to. So for us, literally, particularly, I think we did it for about two years. In that last year, I mean, we kind of knew, all right, we're about to graduate, we're going to be graduating at the end of the year. And we started like in the fall. We're going to identify two folks on staff, and y'all are going to be the ones who are going to take the reins when we leave. And we made it very clear, like, yeah, we got to the point where you run this meeting, you hand out the stories, you're going to help, lay out this page before we were gone.
mhm.
And the idea is that's how you develop that capacity. You get very intentional about it. You plan it into your way of doing business, and that way, like again, it just runs. And that's the beauty of an institution.
Yeah.
You're just gonna have to build it.
Mhm.
Starting now.
I resigned as editor a year. I mean, I could have stayed editor my last year, but I resigned as editor so Sandra could come be editor, and I was still there, but not as an editor. So if she needed some support or help, I was able to help her. Because that is one for any organization, establishing transition and leadership is really hard, not just for newspapers, but just about every type of organization.
Yeah. All right, that'll be it for questions. Just I know we're running a little bit long on it, but we got a couple more things that I do want to go over.
Oh, we do?
First off, all of what you see over here, as well as plenty more. This a large part of this this event, as well as the exhibit downstairs, the Rising Up exhibit, wouldn't have been possible without the student newspaper database. This has been a collaboration between the University of Maryland Archives and the UMD Library's Digital Services and Technologies Division, which was an effort to digitize and make accessible the major student newspapers produced on college campuses. And as you can see there, it's a lot more than the Black Explosion, the Voz Latina, the Public Asian. There's the Eclipse, Hakosh, Honori, Public Asian, as I said again, and so many other different iterations of different ethnic newspapers on this campus, because no matter the era or no matter the group, the purpose and the mission and the need to give a voice to anybody who feels that they've been neglected by this university or by the major hegemonic structure at this campus or worldwide, um, will always be prevalent and will always be needed. So this is just to show that no matter what era, student publications will always happen. Whoa. Then, one other thing. So I've been pegged by the Offices of Diversity and Inclusion. There's a big survey that's been going on. This is the last day. If you're a student, can faculty fill this out as well? Yes. And staff. If you're a student, faculty, or staff, and you feel that, if you think the university's done great, fill it out. If you think the university can improve by, leaps and bounds, fill it out. Especially fill it out then, and be as detailed, be really detailed as possible, because the purpose is that they're going to take all of this data, all of it anonymized, and they will present it to the president and create an action plan that will make sure that this university becomes the best university that it can be on this PWI. So please fill it up. Please fill out the QR code. In fact, after this, once I, sufficiently mingle enough, I will fill this out and I will go about with this survey as well. But with that being said, I want to say one final thing, and that's thank you.